So before I introduce our amazing guest speaker, I'm Nicola Quayle, one of the co-founders of AI Marketers Guild APAC. And just to give you a brief background of, what we do, who we are. So AI Marketers Guild was originally founded in the US by a marketer called David Berkowitz, who's hilarious because he actually says not that David Berkowitz, but yes. And it's grown into, a huge community up there. And we wanted to bring that same sentiment down into Asia Pacific and create a regional community where we can spotlight local pioneers and not only AI tools, marketing best practice, but also world-class thought leaders. So we're hosting these monthly kind of thought leader series, focusing on practical real-world use of AI, but also giving us some more philosophical and thought-provoking angles as well, particularly as it's ramping up day by day. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nici Sweaney, who's an AI consultant, educator, innovator, speaker, and gender equality champion, just to name a few things. But Nici's, been working with leaders across multiple industries, 20 years of experience, originally as a data scientist in the university space, but now advising hundreds of organizations all around responsible AI and also upskilling, professionals in that kind of practical, ethical implementation. I think a lot of us have been getting on the tools, but there's a kind of whole other layer that we need to start thinking about. Nici also serves as a senior fellow at the AI for Developing Countries Forum and founder and CEO of AI Her Way, as well as a winner of the Australian AI Awards Female Leader of the Year. So you've been busy, Nici.
It's very chill, very relaxed.
Well,
a very fast-paced industry. It's nice.
I'm glad you find time to sleep. So, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah.
Feel free for everybody, you can pop questions in the chat or we'll host a Q&A at the end, but I'm sure Nici will manage all that as well. So over to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I am Dr. Nici Sweaney, and it's really lovely to share the afternoon with you. So we have a kind of quick session. I'm going to preface this by saying my most regular speaking gig is a 3.5-hour workshop with organizations. So for me to cover something in half an hour is a real treat and challenge, but I'm going to try my very best. What we're going to be talking about is around equity and bias and safety, right? I know that we have so much AI exposure right now. Everyone is using it. Everyone is talking about it. It's on all our feeds. It is absolutely everywhere at all times. But a lot of it is just about being faster. It's just about doing more. And for me, that's not really the point of AI. The point of AI is to deliver better outcomes for more people and to make more of a positive impact. So I come very much from that space of AI could do amazing things for lots of people if we learn to use it in an ethical, responsible way. And just like it can do lots of awesome things, I really think it has potential to do heaps of really bad things as well if we don't think carefully through it. So my space, like we said in the intro, I talk a lot about ethics, a lot about data governance. I'm very big on practical uses of AI, but it always comes with this undertone of hey, let's actually pause and think through what we're doing before we do it, rather than just saying, we've been able to do all this stuff with AI, so therefore we must be doing a really great job, because that's not necessarily the case. We're going to go through kind of 3 different layers. The first thing I'm going to chat about is just why I think you are in a really good position in your particular industry to not only leverage AI, but also to kind of shape it, and why I think it's really important that you understand what ethical, responsible use of AI looks like. Then we're just going to cover off the main sorts of risks when it comes to using AI, and then a practical audit checklist, something really easy for you to kind of take and go and remember, screenshot, whatever, so that when you're using AI in the future, you actually know, hey, I've done a bit of that foundational thinking. I feel proud to kind of stand by my use of AI because I can back up why I did this thing with it, rather than I watched some random TikTok video and now I'm copy pasting someone's prompt and I don't really know if it's good or not. So before I start any of that, apologies to the team because you saw my talk this morning. So you've seen me talk about this pyramid, but I do present it every time I talk because it helps people conceptualize what I mean when I talk about using AI. right? And why safety matters so much. So for most people, when they're using AI, they're really just talking about prompting a large language model. They're really just talking about opening ChatGPT or opening Claude or typing in some stuff or saying something on their phone and having it respond to them. At that point, ethics and safety and data and bias aren't necessarily really pressing because you're engaging in a conversation, right? You're like having a back and forth chat. So if I'm having a chat with like Peggy and she doesn't quite understand what I mean, I'm able to kind of redirect the conversation and clarify my point or my opinion. But that's only your entry level to using AI. So what happens after that level is you start getting into these autonomous systems that are connected to your tech stack that can go and do work on your behalf. So if I just think about part of my marketing, it's a weekly newsletter. Part of my newsletter is to research the AI news headlines and to write a summary of what's been happening. Part of my newsletter is to say, this is where you can catch Nici next, and that's tied to my calendar. Part of it is to talk about community wins from inside our student space. And so that comes from a testimonials board that lives inside of Notion. So when I have an autonomous system that runs that, I have AI that can go and log in to my calendar, into my Notion, into the internet. It goes and decides what's a good testimonial, what's an event worth talking about, what are the news headlines that are going to matter to her audience, and it writes the entire newsletter. So when we start getting into these autonomous systems that can do work for us, it really matters that we understand data bias, that we understand safety, that we understand ethics, that we understand the risks. Because when you have staff, and now we think about staff as being either a robot or a human, when you have staff, you really want to be sure that they're trained properly to do their job and they're not exposing you to risk because they're doing stuff that you're not necessarily looking at. So as you start to develop your skill set in AI, and I give whole workshops on how to build this skill set, this session is not that, but as you get acquainted with what is available to you in the AI space right now, this stuff matters more and more. So you want to practice it early on. You want to practice it just in your everyday chats with AI so that it feels normal by the time you have autonomous AI staff members. So shifting your thinking around safety because, shifting your thinking around safety to say, okay, maybe it's not always in my face when I'm just using these tools on a day-to-day basis, but it will matter when you have AI staff. And we have AI staff everywhere. We have more AI staff than we have humans. We have about a 10-to-1 ratio. So 10 AI staff members to every 1 human staff member. That's how our business runs, and it will be the new normal. Right now, I get away with this being kind of special because not that many people are doing it. But at some point, this will be the way that businesses are expected to run. And you want to be really sure that these are representing you as an employee, you as an organization, you as a brand, you as a business, because they're going to be doing autonomous work without a human necessarily watching everything that they're doing. So this is where your superpower comes into, because I work with lots of different industries, like very, very different industries, everyone from like doggy daycare to mold restoration to the World Wildlife Fund to the United Nations, right? I'm talking a big spread of industries. And what I love working with are people in creative industries, including people in marketing. The reason why I love working with you is because you shape how other people perceive this stuff. So when we're in marketing, we are also defining the stories and the narratives that are out there in the world. And when you understand what responsible AI use looks like, you can put that out into the world, and that shapes how people perceive what is happening in this space and how they perceive society. So just as a little story, as an aside to that, when we think about marketing, I'm going to show you an image issue, but there are lots of image issues with getting AI generated images, right? So one of them that was a classic, I presented to a bunch of doctors, and it took me 46 attempts with an AI image generator to get a picture of a female doctor. They were all men before that. It actually gave me a picture of a child dressed up as a doctor for Halloween before it gave me a female doctor. So 46 attempts at this. Now, I can instruct AI to explicitly make me a female doctor with certain demographics, certain skin texture, certain height, certain weight. But if I just asked for a doctor, it gave me a man 46 times over. So when we are in marketing, we're leveraging these tools to create stuff that will be seen by the outside world. You have a responsibility to inject diversity and representation at that level. One, because it's good for you. It's going to protect you from all of those kind of data bias and stereotypes and harm. but 2, it's because it actually shapes how everyone else sees the world. There was a study a couple of years ago that young girls were already changing their mind about what job they were going to do because of how much biased information ChatGPT was putting out into the world. So as marketers, we can shape that and we can make sure that it's representing the world that we'd like to create. And that does really big things for society and the masses as well. So you have a double call to action. Yes, I want you to use AI to make your life more simple, to make your work more simple, to save time, to be more efficient, to be more innovative. But on the flip side, you have a responsibility to engage with it ethically and responsibly because you are part of how the rest of the world sees AI and sees what's possible as a human race. So no small thing. Don't worry. No pressure. It's fine. All right. So we have to talk about the main risk. So you know why you're important. And now we need to know what are the risks that you are exposed to, even if they haven't kind of slapped you in the face yet. So I said I'd show you another image example. This one's one of my favorites because I was in Forbes last year, right? And I was going to be shot in a photo for it. And so I wanted to give the photographer a concept that I had been kind of imagining for my Forbes shoot. And so I couldn't find anything on Pinterest. I went to an AI image generator because why not? That's the space I'm in. And I told this image generator, can you make a photo of a woman wearing an emerald suit? She's powerful. She has chin length blonde hair. She's on the cover of Forbes, editorial style, hyper realistic, shot with a Canon Mark II. And this is the picture I got. That's great for her. It doesn't really look like me or give me massive Forbes vibes necessarily. So I tried again. And then I tried 20 more times to get this picture that I could actually give to a photographer to show it. And then I got a little bit frustrated, right? And I was like, can you please make me a picture of a woman in an emerald green suit? She has a small chest and chin length bob. She's powerful, determined, editorial style. She's wearing a shirt underneath her suit, which I didn't necessarily think I would have to get that specific about. And then I got these. So when you are working with AI, it's really important to remember that you are exposing yourself to a tool that has a lot of information in it, but its entire algorithm is made to present the patterns in that information. So the reason why we get, Chesty LaRue here, like good on her, is because when I ask for a picture of a woman standing in a forest, these AI tools are looking at all the pictures that they have of women in order to inform what they present to you. I have not been specific about clothing, stature, height, weight, skin texture, demographic, ethnicity, anything, right? So when I've said woman, it's gone, well, to the best of my knowledge, the pattern that I recognize in the training model that I have is this. It's blonde, it's white, it's very young, it's poreless, it's flawless, and, she's got quite a chest on her because that's what the training model is telling us. So your risks are inherent every time you use AI, right? Because it is a data processing machine that's looking for patterns in data, and it's looking for the patterns in data across the last 30 years of internet. The internet is not amazing. We all know that. And so we're seeing that reflected through there. So you have this data bias. It's a lens towards the last 30 years of internet information. It's a lens towards very Eurocentric, very Western-centric, very male-centric information because that is who has contributed to the internet for the last 30 years. You also have issues around privacy and data security. So if you enter in information, you need to be aware who owns that information after you finish talking to it. Best rule is turn data sharing off if you're using ChatGPT or Claude. And you also need to be aware that it does cost the environment, right? So your main risks here are data privacy, data bias and stereotyping, and then also the environmental cost. Again, I give whole talks about this, but the great thing to remember with environmental costs is we all make environmental decisions every single day. The fact that I'm wearing a piece of clothing made of cotton has a water footprint and an environmental cost. I own more tops than are absolutely necessary to keep me warm, but it's a cost-benefit analysis, all right? So there is a great paper out that shows that eating a beef hamburger is equivalent to about 100,000 queries with ChatGPT in terms of water footprint usage, right? Because the agricultural industry uses huge amounts of energy and huge amounts of water. It's good to remember that we don't want to waste it. It's like leaving the light on when you leave the room. If it's not essential, don't do it. Don't make like weird cat videos with ChatGPT just because you can. But when we actually use it to save us time and when we actually use it to make a positive impact, that is a good use of AI, at least in my books, especially compared to all the other micro decisions we're making about our environmental impact on a day-to-day basis. But remember that data bias is in there every single time. It is a pattern recognition machine. Unless you inject the diversity of pattern, it will make assumptions for you. So we're going to talk about how to solve that one. Environmental cost that is touched on, and data privacy security, turn data sharing off as a basis. If you want to know more about that, please reach out. So this is the way that you're going to deal with that, right? This is really base level. So if you're at level 1, you're still talking to AI tools and you're wondering, how do I do this in a really kind of responsible way? This is a simple example about how you can start to consciously use AI and have it perform in a more ethical, responsible way for you. So prompt A is write a LinkedIn post for a startup CEO announcing Series A, right? And that's going to get you a response. And it might be great, it might not be. It might also have inherent bias in there that is hard for you to see because you haven't asked it to do it in a different way. You've just got the one response. So if you instead said, write a LinkedIn post from a startup CEO announcing a Series A, they're a 42-year-old woman of color who founded the company after a 15-year career in climate research, match her authority without leaning on masculine coded language. Straight away, that's going to give you more specificity, but it's also going to redirect some of its bias. So you don't have to change tools. You don't have to be worried about which the best AI tool is. Most of the quality of output comes from how specific you are in how you direct it. If you specifically ask it to not be biased or to look at something from a different lens or to examine something from another point of view or to present 5 pieces of information that completely refute everything so far and argue the other side of the coin so that you can balance the argument, that's going to lead to way better and way safer outcomes than if you're just directly saying, hey, do this thing for me, and you're taking it and going. Another example of that is recently with Claude, I was putting together a new package for a client. And I said, oh, how much should I charge for this package? And I can't quite remember, but let's say, like it said, it's about 35 grand for this program with this client. And then I said to it, what about if I now told you that I'm actually a 52-year-old white man? And then it said, oh, well, in that case, you should probably charge about $82,000 for the same package. So the fact that you never ask it to look at things in a different way means that you'll miss that diversity in how it can present information. Too many people interact with AI and they think that the answer that they got is the answer. But the fact is that AI is making micro assumptions about you, and it's also making micro assumptions in the moment that get it to present one version of an answer. So it's your responsibility to inject that diversity. Every time you talk with these tools, we also have to remember that we're helping shape how they behave too. So it's a much bigger call to action every time that you generate something, every time you're creating content, every time you're producing something with AI, you are helping AI learn what normal is. If we never inject, again, that equity, that diversity, it will never reflect that back to us. And then we're going to wake up in 5 years' time and go, AI doesn't really work for me. It doesn't sound like me. I don't like it. And then it's just going to be all the tech bros, right? So we want to inject what our values are. And again, in your industry, that is so important because then you're also putting that out into the world, which helps shape how people perceive the information as well. All right, last thing is just a little practical audit. So this is 5 points for how you're going to kind of cross-check what you're currently doing and how to inject more safety and more responsible use into what you're doing with AI already. So the first one is check what model you're using, right? What are you using to do what with? And do you know anything about where it gets its data from? You can Google this kind of stuff. You can ask AI to explain it back to you about how it's trained. It just pays to have awareness. All the AI tools that we usually use are normally either American owned or Chinese owned, right? And it's just important to understand that they're both drawing from different data pools. So again, the answer is not the answer. It's just the answer that that particular tool is giving you. Number 2 is checking how you write to it, right? So is the way that you're prompting, the way that you're speaking to these tools, does it make assumptions, right? are you assuming that AI will understand what good looks like? And it's just that specificity. What does good look like to you? Right? I built a chatbot for a female business coaching company really early on in my AI days. And we told the chatbot that it was working for a bunch of women that own small businesses. And so then it just started calling everyone boss babes. And I was like, oh, boss babe. Oh, yeah, you go, boss babe. So then we had to code in. We said, like, please do not use kind of like infantilizing language. These are your banned words. I don't want any of that. But until we did that, it kind of made this assumption about what would please us. So I had to prompt and say, please do not say X, Y, Z. You have to remember when you're using these tools, again, AI is not necessarily going to have your best interest in heart, but it has the ability to take on any persona that you want. You just have to be very explicit about that, and you have the control over that. So checking your prompts. 3, checking your outputs. Get it to do multiple outputs. That's going to help you see that the answer was only one version of that answer. So if we're writing content, if we're writing a newsletter, if we're producing images, what I say to people is while you're learning how to kind of spot what's good and what's not, get it to do 2 or 3 or 5 iterations of the thing so that you can see how it approaches the same task slightly differently every time you ask it. Because that's going to help you learn, when I say make me XYZ, it doesn't do the same thing every time. So I just need to be really explicit about what I expect every single time. Number 4 is the distribution check. So where is this piece of content going to go, right? And is it accessible to everyone? I mean, I know this is part of how you work anyway, but I think it's just really important as we move into more kind of AI generated spaces and we're just making sure that we're checking for equity and transparency and representation at every single level. There was a classic case of, so when Gemini came out with their image generator, people were using it to create historical images. And then a publisher got into a fair bit of trouble because they published some pictures of people during World War II, but the pictures actually depicted like 14-year-old Vietnamese girls because they'd used Gemini to create the picture, and Gemini was trying to be helpful and insert diversity and representation into a historical image, but it just wasn't factually true. So making sure that you're checking your output and that it's serving the purpose that you would desire it to serve. Again, that you're not getting caught up in the, oh my God, I'm able to do so much because I have AI, so therefore I'm not quality control checking it anymore. Remember, if you get fired tomorrow or if your business is hurt tomorrow, AI does not go home feeling bad about that. You are the only person that will feel bad about that. And legally speaking, from a regulation point of view, you also can't blame AI for anything. Any content that you produce with it that you put out there into the world is actually your IP, right? So you need to stand by it. All right, and the last one is the authority check. Anytime you have stats and references and really kind of, if you share percentages or findings or if you share people's quotes, that is the number one place where AI can get stuff wrong. Because again, AI's whole purpose is to serve you and be helpful. Its number one biggest fear is that it will let you down. So if it can't quite find the right information or if it can't quite find an amazing quote, it will really confidently make up one in the hopes that it pleases you. So anytime there's really specific facts, that is your place to do the quality control check. It doesn't mean you have to go through everything AI makes for you with a fine-tooth comb, but anytime it's quoting an exact statistic or it's referencing an exact article or something else that you found, it is worthwhile checking so that you can stand by what you've done with AI. So the last thing is just to remember, if your AI workflow doesn't specify that diversity, it will default to however it was trained, whoever trained it, and it will default to the past. The big thing I say a lot to people is that AI doesn't know what future we hope to create. It only knows what we've done, and then it models its answers off that. So often in marketing, our idea is around changing perceptions, it's changing people's vision, it's changing the way people perceive, products or brands, but even how they feel in a moment. That is often a newness. And you have to be really explicit about how you want that newness to be experienced so that AI can help you get to that point, right? Don't assume that it has your best interests in heart. So your job is deciding what the brand says, how it's felt, how it's seen, right? You don't have to have a responsibility for training the model. You don't have to have a responsibility for picking the right AI tool. You don't have to have a responsibility for writing up the policy. Where your responsibility lies is making sure, again, that you are thinking about ethics when you're engaging with these tools, and that you ensure that AI is representing you, the business, the brand properly. Don't assume that it's going to do that for you. So what I want you to do after now is running that audit on one thing. Choose one piece of work. But if you don't want to choose one piece of work and you just want to go everywhere, I'm very happy for you to go everywhere. It's a framework for you to think through that guideline every time you're doing something from now on. The second thing I want you to try is just adding some diversity by design into the way that you talk to AI. So the next time you're working through something really big or a strategy or a campaign or a piece of content, I just want you to say like, hey, what are 5 different perspectives that I haven't even considered yet? Or what would someone in a completely different location say about this piece of work? Or, all right, now tell me how this particular persona would feel about this piece of writing. The cool thing about AI is it has, approaching kind of unlimited data entry points. It can take on whatever persona you give it. It can analyze something from a different point of view. It can play the role of 17 different people or even whole focus groups and give you their perspective and opinion, but it will not do that by default unless you ask it to. So remember to inject that diversity and then share. Actually talk about what you've found, what you've come up against. If you're lucky enough to work with other people, I always advise doing like a regular check-in about what we're doing with AI and how it's working. I used to have an AI sandbox hour with my team on Thursdays at 2 p.m. when I had like a corporate job. And I said, hey, all right, in this hour, everyone's going to use AI. Next staff meeting, each person has 3 minutes to talk about something that they found and then something that they struggled with. Having that capacity and the permission to play and share is really important because this is not a solo sport. AI is changing the way that we work. It's changing what it means to be human. It's changing how we spend our time. It is not just yours to figure out. We absolutely have to be leveraging the community collective to work out the best way forward. As a little freebie of today, we did give you a skills starter kit. So if you are starting out building skills files, which are just files that tell AI how to do a particular thing, if you're starting out with this pack gives you a template to make sure that you've actually thought about governance and ethics within your skills files so that when you're instructing AI to do something for you, it is absolutely going to think through what are the do's and what are the do nots that are important to this person so that I adhere to your rules and guidelines every time I'm doing this particular thing. It also has in there 3 templates of existing skills that could be really useful for you to use. And of course, for anyone that does want to learn more about this is exactly what we teach inside of our AI for Impact Hub. So we teach whole AI operating systems, how to get this up and running in multiple areas in the business with governance embedded from the very start so that you can feel really proud about how you're using AI and so that you can actually track and trace the decisions that you've made with it in case anybody ever asks, because this is the new normal. All right, that was very fast and very fun, and I hopefully that you got some tips and tricks out of it. Very welcome to stay around for questions or any comments or anything that people are wondering about how they're currently using AI and how to make sure you're doing it in a safe and ethical, responsible way.
Oh my gosh, that was well done, Nikki. It was awesome. That's incredible. But I mean, I've got a couple of queries, but I'd love if anybody just wants to unmute if you've got any questions or pop them in the chat, because you've got Nikki here now.
Yeah, use me while you got me.
I was going to say, yes. All right. Well, no, that's fine. So look, really interesting, so many thoughts there. But first around exactly that, I think marketers can forget that when they're producing content or campaigns or ideas in AI that, ultimately they are representing the brand, and some get it terribly wrong, i.e., a thing called Deloitte last year,
Yeah.
was. So yeah, any other advice, as you said, I think sort of teaching, really spending time to teach it, but any other quick bits of advice on, brand guardrails and what people could do today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think one of the things is coming up with your kind of your own quick checklist. So what we often do with organizations is we'll get them to come up with like the 3 or 4 absolute do nots with AI and the 3 or 4 like what's your orange light. So what are the things that you need to check or be mindful of, and just print it out and keep it as like a card. So for example, like before things go live, have we like asked AI to check for its own bias, right? And present any kind of information to us? Have we asked for 3 different iterations of this and kind of compared and contrast? And have we got someone very different from us to also review it? Especially if that stuff is going out on behalf of a brand. And then your like absolute no's might be like, we never ask AI to do kind of like research on statistics. We always kind of go and grab that information ourselves. Or we never get AI to publish stuff without someone's consent or explicit permission. So it's just kind of like those real do's and do nots. And where is your line in the sand? And that line in the sand moves. So, I teach an auto versus ask matrix. So what are the things that you're going to allow AI to automatically do? And what are the things that you want it to ask you about before it does? That line in the sand moves the more that you use AI and the more trust that you embed in it. So for example, like this is not necessarily marketing, but it's part of my brand. I have AI that triages my entire inbox, right? And when I first set it up, I didn't have it send anything. I just had it mark what emails were FYI, what was from a client, what should go to my team. And I watched it do that for a few days to validate it and correct it. Then I moved it to, hey, you can automatically now forward things to my team and give them a one line about why this email is actually something they can help me out with. So then I checked that for another few days, right? And then I said, oh, cool. Now you can automatically archive all those emails that you've said are just FYI once you send me a summary. But I still don't have it send client-facing emails. Right now, it's only allowed to draft emails to clients, but it has to have me check it and then hit send. So a human has to do that step. So that line kind of moves as you trust it more and more. And eventually I imagine that I'll say, cool, you can now email clients, but I just want you to explicitly say that I'm Nici's AI email assistant. Don't try and pretend it's from me. So that kind of moves the more and more that you use it and the more trust that I have baked in, because I've tested it, because I have rules around what it's allowed to do and not do, because I'm very explicit around the language that we like to use, our brand ethos, our brand authority, and I've seen it work. Again, it's a bit like hiring a person. I'm able to then say, cool, now you're okay to go and do that thing on your own. The flip side of that is also just recognizing it's going to screw up. Like people screw up, people make mistakes, and we forgive them. I think people have this like heightened expectation that if AI ever does anything wrong, they're like, oh, well, that was a failure. We don't think like that with the internet. We all know there's terrible information on the internet, but we still use it because we know it's also really useful. So people aren't going around being like, oh, that Wikipedia entry was wrong, so now I've decided that the internet is not a thing. That's not how we frame that, but it is how a lot of people kind of think about AI. So if it writes one wrong piece of content, if it gives them a biased piece of information, we go, oh, like that's not useful. It is really useful. We just have to recognize that it's not infallible. And so we need to stop putting that lens of like, it's tech, so it's perfect. It's actually code's best attempt at replicating how human brains process and create information. So it has a bit of the same messiness as a human brain. And it's really up to you to be super explicit about your expectations. It's a bit like training a child. That sounds terrible. But like it's like training a child in that when we are working with young children, you have to be really explicit about your expectations, right? If you want consistent behavior. So like you give them one task at a time. You say, can you go and get your shoes from the cupboard? And then you give them lots of praise when they get the shoes. And then eventually you get them to get the shoes on. And then eventually you say, okay, go and get dressed. And that's a progressive skill set that you build over time. You need to kind of approach AI with that same sort of slowly is going to lead to fast, big results, rather than fast is going to end up being messy and something that you're always going to have to rectify and correct. So it might feel cool to start with, but you're much better off kind of doing the hard yards early on, proving that you can trust it, being really explicit about your expectations, which is why we give you the skills templates. Be really explicit about what you expect it to do. And then as it proves that it's actually doing that thing, then you can give it more and more autonomy.
Brilliant. And hopefully the AI won't have a temper tantrum, but yeah.
I mean, probably will at some point.
Yeah.
My AI, one of my AI tools the other day just told me to stop overthinking and move on.
You're like, oh,
I was like, no, I have not finished weighing up options for hotels. You will analyze 10 more.
Now, Peter, if you can come off mute, do you want to ask your question? Otherwise, I can paraphrase. Peter's all right. I'm going to paraphrase for Peter because I don't know where he's calling in from. So Peter's question was around trying to find agency level governance, and if you've got different team members testing, how do we streamline that?
Yeah. So I mean, I know the horse is kind of bolted because lots of people are testing lots of things. If you work with other people, you have to pause and have the discussion about what's okay and what's not. So I encourage everyone that works, even if you're just working by yourself, right? I encourage everyone to have something documented about this is what we do and do not do with AI. And for us, it can be like as simple as a couple of paragraphs saying like, we use AI to improve our outcomes by like leveraging high repetition tasks. We do not have data sharing turned on, and our preference is for like these couple of tools. And if clients want to opt out, they can elect to, right? But something that makes it clear, because otherwise you do get rogue use. There's this term called shadow AI use, where a high percentage of employees or a high percentage of workers will be using AI tools without ever talking about it. So there's two parts to that. There's having a discussion around what is okay and what is not okay, and we all have to agree to it. Then there's also the part of the permission thing. When you start having weekly chats about how you're using AI, when you start building out a shared space where people can log what they've tested and what they've tried, it takes away this kind of like stigma attached to AI and makes people be a bit more open about it, which means you can start having conversations around ethical, safe use. So those two things generally help, but just know it's really normal. Every organization I walk into, even like, really big, like billions of dollars organizations, a lot of the time they don't have a clear guideline about what's okay and what's not. And that's a lot of the time what we're helping them to do. So you're not alone there, but it's a good conversation to have as quickly as you can.
It's brilliant. Thanks, Nikki. Dax, did you want to come off mute and ask a couple of questions?
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So this is the specific question we are doing for one of our clients. So we have been building a series of AI animation films where we have created a character. Think of it like, Paw Patrol or Bob the Builder. And one of the questions that the client actually asked is, it's a series of AI animation films we are doing, whether they can actually, copyright the character and can they sort of license it? Because it's AI generated. I thought I'll check with you on that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So at the moment, it kind of depends a little bit where you are located around how the legislation impacts you. So it's worthwhile kind of Googling copywriting laws. But at the moment, usually what you create, you are able to copyright. The flip side of that is that it may be reproduced for somebody else using the tool if you've been using a tool that allows it to be trained on your data. So for example, like Midjourney is one of the big image generators in the AI space. If you create art with Midjourney, you are allowed to sell that art and you do have copywriting license to it. But there is also a possibility, because it's part of Midjourney's data training model, because it created it, it may reproduce that same piece of art for somebody else. And then they also are able to kind of go and do that. So if, as quickly as you can, if you can kind of trademark that and license it, it's this kind of safest way to go. But yes, you are allowed to do that. It's not necessarily AI's to own. Once you've created it, it's considered your property.
Mm-hmm. Right. I had the similar thing happened with the music as well, because we created this video which has a background score. So we are using a commercial license for Suno, but
Yes.
they wanted to know whether they can actually distribute this on Spotify as well as other mediums, whether they have the license to do that, even though we have commercial license for
Yeah.
Suno.
As far as I know, yes, because there's been quite a few viral songs on Spotify that are created by Suno.
All right. Perfect.
Gosh, that's crazy.
Carly, I might just answer this one in the chat about do you create metrics or ways to measure the quality of your AI produced output? Yeah, absolutely. So it's like having staff. You have KPIs, like you have performance metrics. We have performance review meetings with our agents. We look at what they're doing. But even just in a single kind of prompt or a session, if you're just working through like on a desktop large language model program, you can have ways for it to cross-check what it's done and then give you a self kind of evaluation. And that's pretty straightforward, right? So you just kind of get to the end of doing something and then you're like, all right, can you now examine everything you've done for possible bias? Are you pushing any possible stereotypes? If someone came from the Gender Equity Council, how would they examine this problem? Like, you can ask it to role play as some people in that space and kind of poke holes in its own story. So a lot of the time when I'm working on strategic things or ideas or big campaigns and like chunky work, I'll get to the end and I'll be like, what are 5 weaknesses here that I haven't even considered? Or like, what is going to be a way that someone analyzes this where it's possibly, I don't know, going to make them feel excluded that I haven't yet thought of? So I'll just phrase a few different questions like that and get it to spit back things. The important thing to note in that is that if you ask it, you know, have I possibly, I don't know, left anyone out of this? Because you phrase the question like that, it's a leading question and AI doesn't want to disappoint you. So it will absolutely point out people that you've probably left out, even if you haven't really left them out. So at that point, that's where your critical judgment really comes into play. It's going to present a bunch of information to you and you get to be the one to decide how much it actually matters or not. Because AI's whole purpose is to please you. So if you say, what are 5 perspectives I've missed out on? What's another way of analyzing this problem? What would someone in a different socio-demographic range think of this? What would my ideal client, what would they love about it? What would they hate about this? All of those sorts of questions. Even if your ideal client actually wouldn't hate anything, it's going to try real hard to come up with something that the ideal client will hate because it wants to please you and answer your question for you. But it's a nice way of kind of capturing lots of different perspectives. I kind of liken it to having a board of advisors. So you do a piece of work and then you throw it out and you make AI take on different personas and analyze what you've done. They present their findings, what they like about it, what they don't. It's ultimately up to you about which way you go with it.
Great, thank you. And just quickly to tag on if time allows, what about from an AI kind of tech stack perspective in terms of like there's so many different tools to choose. A lot of the AI offerings have their own kind of center of gravity, the thing that they do quite well. Like when you're, you know, for your own business or when you're consulting for other people's businesses, is there an approach that you take in terms of like pitching one tool over another?
I don't, but because I'm very pro being tool agnostic. So the way that we teach things and even, you know, talking about having like skills files and stuff, we have all of that on our own servers. So for us, everything that we create, every like project that we're using, every AI agent that we have, all of its files and its, you know, everything that we've used to design it will also live, for us it lives in Notion, but like, you know, Google Drive, SharePoint, whatever. Because it means like when things like the start of this year happened where everyone went, oh my God, Claude's amazing. And then all these people are like, oh, now I have to take all my stuff from ChatGPT and put it on Claude. We just didn't have that problem because all of our stuff existed in a central place. Some of it was in ChatGPT, like being used in ChatGPT. Some of it was being used in Claude. But we could just say, hey, Claude, go and look at this file. That's what I want you to do. So I don't necessarily advocate for tools over another unless I see a specific use case where I'm like, you know what would be awesome at that? This thing, right? That being said, what I normally tell people is just choose one large language model, pay for it, and get really good at it, right? Because they're all in an arms race with each other. They're all releasing things when, you know, someone will come out with something and then the rest of them are like, oh my God, we got to come out with the same thing. So like, until you're using it a lot, honestly, for most people, they will not tell the difference, right? Until you're using it every day. Now, when it comes to my tech stack, I have paid ChatGPT and I also have paid Claude. I use Claude probably at the moment around 90% of the time, and I use Codex, which is OpenAI's version of Claude Code. I use that for a bit of work when it's not tricky stuff that I need Claude to work on, because Codex I just get way more tokens, so it's just freer to do like busy work. So I use those two. We have Gemini because we're a Google Workspace. I use Nano Banana for image creation. I use VO for video. I might use Higgsfield for video as well. And then when we're looking at multi-agents, I also have some self-hosted large language models so that we can do some stuff without paying for it. That is like beyond what most people need. Most people need one large language model and to actually learn all the features, because most people still aren't necessarily using like if you're on Claude, most people aren't necessarily using projects and skills and scheduled tasks and Claude co-work. Until you've maxed that out, there's really no point adding more stuff for the sake of feeling clever. It's not necessarily going to get you much further.
Thanks so much, Nici.
Sorry, one
sorry,
question,
Dax.
one quick clarification. You mentioned you use Codex over Claude Code. Is there a specific reason for that?
No, it's really just the type of work I'm doing. So I will use Codex when I already have a system for something and I'm just wanting it to execute. So what I'm thinking of, for example, is I have a system that checks my diary every week and it detects if I have a presentation within the next 7 days. And if I have a presentation within the next 7 days, it will go to my Notion and my email and gather up all the information about it. And then it will go into Canva and have a look at how I last presented about that and then do an outline for my talk. Once I've approved the outline, so I do that with Claude because I find it thinks through things a bit better. Once I approve the outline though, I have Codex actually produce the presentation slides because sometimes, like I speak a lot, right? So sometimes I'm legitimately prepping like 15 presentations at once and they might have anywhere between like 15 and if I'm doing a half-day workshop, I might have 150 slides. So if I got Claude to do all of that, I would max out my tokens. So I just switch and I have Codex do all of that because it's just more cost effective. Yeah. So it really depends on the task. And it's just the matter of fact that I pay for both. So I try and maximize my usage of both. But if I only paid for one, I'd be able to do all of that on one. It's just, preference for how much we are doing with it and where we kind of spread that cost.
Amazing. No, that was so fantastic. I have to say, I am taking the hamburger example from my 16-year-old daughter who has been telling me all about, the water consumption every time I put it, and I have to think about it if I put a mega prompt in. But so I'm going to let her know about that one. But
yeah. And it's not without fault, but I just think there's this spotlight on it because it's new and it's adding to the problem. So yes, we've got this concentration on it, but like we're all, like fashion in particular is one of the most water thirsty and energy consumption heavy industries. And AI is not coming close to that yet. And also the flip side of it, not that it's an individual user's problem, but probably the only way that we're going to be able to green AI is to use AI to work out how to make AI greener. So there's this little bit of a catch-22 in that we are probably going to solve some of our really big humanitarian problems by leveraging tech. But in the meantime, we have to kind of have the energy consumption that goes along with that in order to get to a better place. So I fully understand. I mean, I'm an ex-conservation ecologist. That's why my PhD was in. So I do very much understand that side of it. But there's this like realistic balance with what we're doing without thinking about it. And there's a lot of stuff that we're doing without thinking about it that doesn't make anything better. Whereas when we use AI strategically, it really can improve our lives and our community's lives and also the way that we do business and who we serve and how many people we can serve as well.
to your point, be mindful at our prompts and critically thinking around the output. And I think that's been one of the key takeaways here today. So thank you again, Nici. I hope you can get some time out tonight because I know it's been a big day for you.
Oh, I know. I feel like if I talk tomorrow, I'm going to lose my voice, but it's fine. We live to reign another day. Thank you so much for hosting me this afternoon. It's been a real pleasure to join you and really nice to see some of your faces and to meet you as well. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nici. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.